Okay, we're live. I'm here with my guest Scott. Scott, thanks for coming on, man. We know each other through the baseball strength and conditioning ranks. We're going to talk nutrition today and maybe how it blends in with that S&C background. But tell us about your journey, man. Tell us about yourself, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me. Yeah, I mean, just to kind of start, you know, came out of college and started right into professional baseball with the Cleveland Guardians. And yeah, I started off as a strength coach and just about 10 years with Cleveland, and then made my switch to more of a nutrition role. So that's how I ended up where I'm at currently with the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm entering my second year. Last year, I spent a season with the year prior to that, sorry, spent a season with the Las Vegas Raiders as their nutrition assistant. And then, like I said, prior to that, I was about 10 to 11 years with Cleveland Guardians as a strength conditioning coach in their minor league system with a nutrition role as well.
Was the nutrition thing always something you were intrigued in? Was it something that was like, I can make this my specialty, or like just trying to expand? Or was it like out of necessity in the minor leagues of like, we need somebody to do the food because nobody is here to do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's as you know, like what 10 years ago, like we were kind of the nutritionist. So we had a consultant that would come in spring training and give us like, hey, what's going on in the world of nutrition, and really just give us like the quick hits of nutrition so that we can go and educate those guys, you know, on a day-to-day basis in the affiliate world. So always handled that. And then just as nutrition started to expand, we took on those roles of catering. We organized the bus trips to stop at places to make sure that guys were getting quality food sources. And so we already always had a little bit of that role. And honestly, the decision came, I was at a little bit of a crossroads in my career, and just really looking to see how I can take that next step to really just do something that I enjoy. So I always wanted to actually do strength conditioning and nutrition. So that was always the goal. But then after going through the process, passing the exam, I took the job with the Raiders as a nutrition assistant, and it was just solely focused on nutrition. And I said, hey, I want the experience. Obviously, seeing an NFL setting would be great just because all I've ever known is baseball. And really just being immersed in that setting, I was like, I love this. Like I really enjoy just focusing on nutrition. And I was thankful that at the Raiders that we were still immersed with the strength and conditioning coaches. So our offices shared the weight room. We were allowed to walk the floor, engage with the athletes. So like I wasn't missing that piece of it. In a sense of like programming. But I was still able to have the conversations with strength coaches, with players about their workouts. And so really I was just like, this is great. I loved it. And at the time just wasn't sure what route I was going to go, but then the Blue Jays job opened up as just the major league dietitian, and I was interested in that, and I've continued to enjoy that role. Again, same situation where I get to be with the strength coaches and talk shop with them and be immersed in that, so I don't really miss out on it. But I love handling the food side of things. I've really just fallen in love with it.
I have a lot of questions with this. So let's start first with the schooling aspect. So, what kind of schooling did you have to go through? Were you doing some of it during pro baseball? Was it like you left baseball, did the schooling, came back? You mentioned a certification. Like, what was the process of becoming an official RD?
Yeah, so I started school, and I was thankful that I found a program that was all remote. So I was doing everything online. So I was able to continue to work, studying on bus trips and whatnot during the season. So I was able to still work full time and complete my schooling. And another thing, I was fortunate that my original bachelor degree allowed me to handle a lot of the sciences that I would have needed to take, and having those courses already under my belt, it shaved off like about 2 years. So still had 2 years of like the heavy coursework of the advanced nutrition and medical nutrition therapy and that, but was able to just kind of work ahead in that aspect. So then from there, once I graduated, I was ready to just dive in. So there was a little bit, once you complete the your RD schooling, your dietetics program, you're then required to complete hours. So you have 1,200 hours of clinical rotations, food service rotations, um, community rotation, and then some type of elective. That's 1,200 hours combined. It's not all in one. So, but again, I was very fortunate that my program accepted what they call prior assessed learning. So I was able to go back to my employer and say, a lot of these tasks I handled with the food service, which with education components and whatnot. So I was able to utilize that experience to help, reduce the hours. I still had a lot of hours to do, but I was also very fortunate for that. And then, really what it came down to was, do I want to do the full-time track or the part-time track? So obviously the full-time track, you're committed to the program. It's more of a 40-hour a week in the clinical setting or food service setting, wherever you are, or the part-time track where it was obviously a lot slower progress. I could still maybe continue to work, but I just found that I didn't want to try to balance a job and that. I wanted to just really focus on one area. And so couldn't really make it work at the time with Cleveland to stay on as a strength conditioning coach to complete those hours. But I'm very thankful that I chose that route because it allowed me to just get through the process quicker, really be immersed in it and learn like hands-on, just to really maximize that learning, just because like clinical setting is a whole new setting. All I've known is sports. So you go into a hospital and now you're learning about, kidney functions and diabetes and all these things that it's just, I'm really glad I committed to that full time. And then from there, once I completed my hours, I took about a good month and a half to study for the RD exam. I was also always studying throughout the clinical work, um, and food service work as well. And then yeah, passed about mid-June, and that's when I became a licensed RD, and that was of 21.
How difficult is that exam?
It's difficult. It was challenging just because it's an adaptive test, so it kind of adjusts as you go. And there's all these theories on like, oh, if it gets harder, that means you're doing well. If it gets easier, you're not doing well. And you just start to like almost play a mind game while you're taking the test. Like, well, that question was super easy. Am I not doing well? And of course it's timed. So like that also, play into it. And but just the study material, it just covers so much. It was like there were percentages for you knew it was going to be a little bit heavier on certain topics, but still, it's just such a broad range of topics that it was challenging. But I was very fortunate. I passed the first time.
That's awesome. Yeah, congrats, man. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
thanks.
Okay, so the next step after passing, you talk about being with the Raiders. So I guess twofold here. Like obviously you have a lot of experience in professional baseball as a strength coach. How does that like schedule differ for you when you were in the NFL with the Raiders? And then, it's your first time as a nutrition role while kind of seeing what's going on with strength and conditioning. So like, how do you blend that background with like without stepping on toes of the actual strength and conditioning staff?
Yeah, so it was definitely quite a schedule shock. It's pretty much like spring training every day, where you're in there early and then you're getting out about 4 or 5 p.m. So I enjoyed that aspect. Unfortunately, my wife stayed in Cleveland, so I was out there alone. She would come visit, but much more of like yeah, you're gonna go home and have dinner like with your family. So that was unique, but I used that time to just kind of read up on current research and do projects. I still had projects to do and whatnot, so I made the most of it. But yeah, definitely, a different, change in the schedule. I laugh. I tell the story a lot. We being in Vegas, we traveled to New Orleans, and we were going to stay on the East Coast because we had a game against, I forget who it was, but another East Coast team. That was Jacksonville. So we flew 2 days ahead to get ready to acclimate to New Orleans, have meals in the hotel. And then we, have the game, we pack up, we actually go to IMG for a week to practice out of their facility. We were there for 3 days. We pack up there, go to Jacksonville for 2 days, do our thing, play the game, get home. And I just remember talking to like a lot of the trainers and strength coaches, and they're like, "Man, that was exhausting. We were pretty much gone for, however many days." And and I looked at Rick Slate, if you remember Rick. He was in baseball for a while with the Braves, and I just looked at him and we were like laughing. We're like, that's every other road trip in baseball. So it's just funny the differences. But yeah, so then to answer your next question, just about the experience I brought stepping on toes, like it's strength and conditioning's training might be a little bit different in terms of like what they're training for, but there are still a lot of the same components. So I just really try to use that time to ask questions, and if they had asked me for, my thoughts on what maybe we did in baseball, or what my philosophies were, it's like I would share that, but I just went in there knowing that it was their space. It did allow me to understand that, like their programming a lot better, and really have that relationship with the players to be able to talk about, hey man, you had a heavy training day, talking to the strength coaches about some of your volume numbers, like here's how we can, tailor your needs to recover or feel. So I felt like it definitely helped me there. But yeah, the biggest thing is I didn't want to show up there and step on any toes, and start implementing programs, or suggesting programs, because the strength and conditioning staff there was great. They had so much experience. It was almost, I just looked at it as an opportunity for me to go and learn from them. And then just natural conversations, occurred.
So let's fast forward to your current spot now with the Blue Jays. Before we talk strength and conditioning and everything, like what does your day to day look like? Do you travel with the team? Like, what's kind of your major job responsibility, so to speak?
Yeah. So day to day, to answer your question, I do travel with the team, for every road trip, which I enjoyed. So yeah, pretty much my day to day is I will show up to the park and really just visit and work with our kitchen staff, just check in, make sure things are going, on schedule. I've already worked with them on the menu for that week, so it's really just checking in with them to make sure that there's nothing that we're missing, or a delivery didn't happen, whatnot. And then anything that's noteworthy that I'm aware of from like certain players that may need, you know, they're looking for a certain meal, that first meal period, or whatnot. Anything for dealing with players that were trying to achieve their goals, like with weight loss or weight gain, or just have special needs, make sure that we're on track for them to pick up their meals, or just be ready to have that. And then from there, it's just starting to get set up with my day. I'll stop in my office with the strength and conditioning coaches and just talk to them, see what's going on with them. Um, then I will start to go pretty much just get the supplements ready for guys. That we have a handful of guys that I'm working with individually, that I will go and just prepare, make it so that they can just come grab their supplements and get on with their day. We have logistically, our supplements are in the weight room, and it's a little bit of a hike to the locker room. So just to avoid any like, hey, I gotta go all the way to the weight room to grab my supplements and then come back for lunch, I just try to get it to the locker room area so that they can just grab and go. And then it's just going back into the lunch period and seeing if there's any players in there that I can touch base with. Really just chatting. Like I try not to make every time I'm in the lunchroom, I'm looking at people's plates. I don't want to be that dietitian that hovers and they think I'm always just going to be judging them. So just try to have natural conversations with them to build that relationship. And then certainly if something comes up about the food, or how we can design their plate, to fuel them for the day, or whatnot. We will have an HP meeting daily, just with our high performance staff, so trainers, strength coaches, mental skill, mental performance. And then that's just a great way to touch base, go through the day to day with the guys, who's dealing with what. And then that way, if there's anything I need to know about, whether it's a sickness, illness, maybe guys aren't recovering as well, I can make that a touch point when I go into the lunchroom and seek out those guys. So I'm always appreciative of that, because, I don't want to speak for other organizations, but, I think it's important to include the dietitian in those talks, just because there is that avenue to help them, with that. And the more that, we have a heads up on areas of just soreness or recovery, energy levels, or just, even just voicing simple things, like nagging injuries or just anything we can help with. It just gives us that conversation piece to have with the players, and it just shows that we're all on the same page. So I'm very thankful that we have an organization that supports that. And then from there, it's once the players go on to like hitting, the cage work or their throwing programs, it's just a time to regroup with the kitchen staff. What went well in the lunch service, what didn't go well, any adjustments that we need to make for the future. And then it's just getting geared up for our pregame meals. And that's where a lot more of the, pregame smoothies, pregame meals. I have a lot more involvement with that just because guys, as you know, it's a quick turnaround from when they come off of batting practice, and a lot of them just aren't starving, but they need food, they need fuel. So working with them to make sure they're getting their needs there, doing a lot of the hydration work to make sure that the bench is set up for that. And then, yeah, just kind of hanging out, making sure guys are ready to go for the game. And then once the game starts, that's a time for me to touch base with strength coaches, if they're in. Obviously, if they're out of the game, I can't talk to them. But and then just revisiting with the kitchen staff again, just constantly trying to get feedback from them on what went well, so we can continually improve. And then it's getting set up for post game. I'll enter some notes. Usually, that's a good time for me to start to line up catering for the road, because I do handle the catering. So that's a quiet time for me where I can make some calls. If I need to do that during the day, obviously I'll do that during the day as well. But I try not to take too much time away from the players. And then, yeah, I mean, same thing on the road. It just kind of is a shortened day, and there's a lot more communication with the airlines because we're doing meals for them on the airlines. A lot more moving parts with different caterers that we use. We try to use a variety of caterers to meet the food needs that we have for our players, and so there's just constant communication with them to make sure they're on time and they're getting through, communicating with the clubbies to make sure the food's going to be set out on time and how we can make sure it's staying warm. Um, and then, but pretty similar function on the road as the home. It's just trying to have those touch points with players.
Yeah, there's a few points here that I want to hit on. So the first one being obviously including the nutritionist in kind of that high performance model, those meetings and everything. I know from my own experience at Fenway, the strength and conditioning office is shared with the nutritionist. Part of it is, Fenway is a very small place, but our weight room is connected to the kitchen, and
Okay.
so we share an office with the nutritionist. Anytime we take body comps, like he's literally right there. We're all within 100 feet of each other 90% of the day, unless we're out on the field. So for us, that's very seamless. He's also well versed in strength and conditioning, so he can kind of talk to us about some things. Um, and so in terms of like your background and being able to bounce ideas, I'm sure that's beneficial. Of like, if you have a five day routine for a starter, which day is his heaviest lifting day. You can modify his nutrition accordingly. And it sounds like you guys are leaning into that a little bit. I would imagine knowing that you have that background probably helps you a ton. And then
Yeah.
the other thing that you talk about is like catering and flight food. I don't think people realize, and I don't know how they could realize if they don't have behind the scenes, how much food gets eaten in a given day.
Yeah.
Specifically in professional baseball, that's my only experience, but we play every day. So you have
Right.
your welcome meal, your BP meal, your post game meal. If you hop on a plane, there's food on the plane.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's food at the hotel. And so that was what I was going to ask you is, do you have an assistant, or if you're doing all of this on your own? It sounds like all of it is falling on your plate, which in itself is like an enormous task to take on. So I'm sure that takes up more time than you're openly like admitting to me right now. Like I feel like you're trying to downplay it and be like, no, no, it's cool. And then like I see our
Yeah.
nutritionist and like his staff, and they're trying to order food and they're like in panic mode because
Yeah.
the game went to extra innings or something. And then that leads me to my last point here is like, you talk about keeping the food warm and like organizing that stuff. My dad is a chef, so he's in,
Oh, okay.
culinary, and I understand everything that goes into like taking care of a kitchen, cleanliness, keeping food warm, like serving it at appropriate temperatures. There are so many things that like the common person doesn't understand with like cleanliness and like sanitation and like just being appropriate with food that like if you're not there, it's probably cringeworthy if you see it anywhere and you're like, I need to take care of this. Like something is gonna go wrong, someone's gonna get sick. And even I feel that way, and I'm not perfect with it by any means, but like just being raised from him, I'm like, we really shouldn't do that around the kitchen. Like
Yeah.
do you have that experience at all? You don't have to throw anyone under
Yeah.
the bus, but just
No,
in
no, but
general, like
yeah, you're right. I mean, just such a process because like you think about, you're gonna have a meal, let's say post game meal delivered at 9 p.m. That food isn't cooked at 8 p.m. and delivered. It's probably prepared who knows how long in advance, and it's probably cooked earlier that day. So it's going to be cooked, and then it's going to be hopefully held warm, but it might be cooled down and then heated back up, and then it needs to travel however far, and then it gets to the stadium and sits for who, because the biggest challenge is, as you know, with baseball, there's no time limit. So, you could say, let's get the meal here at 9 p.m. and then the game goes till 10:30. So it's been sitting there for an hour and a half and it's just sitting under warmers, which it's keeping warm, but probably the top, proteins aren't staying terribly, cooked. So yeah, it does. It can be nerve wracking depending on the facility. Of course, there's facilities that do it great. There's others that you really struggle with, and there's a lot of trust that goes into it. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot that can go wrong, and I think it's important to have somebody with the experience, whether it's a registered dietitian or just somebody who has that experience to look out for those things. Because yeah, I've been in ballparks where we'll have sandwiches delivered, and I come back in from BP and they're still sitting out. It's been like 3 hours that those sandwiches are just sitting out in normal temperature, and I'm just like, we gotta get rid of those. Like, I don't care if we're throwing them away. Like, guys can't eat deli meat that's been sitting out for that long. So yeah, it's a challenge, and yeah, you're right. There is a lot that goes into the food setup. I do have help. Our chef in Toronto does help facilitate some of the setup just to help keep up, me keep up with that. So I'm very thankful that he's willing to help out with that aspect, especially with cities that we know, like the Bostons, the Baltimores. Obviously New York is New York, but a lot of cities that we're familiar with, he will take on because he's familiar, and we have a routine there.
New York is its own
Oh
place,
yeah,
man. It's
yeah,
incredible there. Um, so do you have a minor league staff that you oversee too, or is that kind of a separate entity in your setting?
yeah. We have a minor league staff. I don't oversee it. Our minor league coordinator, Kat Mangieri, she does a great job with it. We just work more hand in hand and just pick each other's brains. But yeah, she's been our coordinator for quite some time, and we have affiliate dietitians that she manages. So yeah, they all report to her. I help wherever I can, if there's anything that I can provide. But yeah, we're two separate entities, but there's a lot of communication that still goes into it, especially within our AAA dietitian, because there's a lot of back and forth there, as you know. So yeah, I'm very thankful that we have the nutrition team that we do. Um, it just allows us to expand our nutrition services at each level, and really just track our guys throughout the system. And I think it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be said that I don't think that's the norm in every organization. At least from my experience, and like we talked about earlier, when we first got in the game, it was like we were doing everything. And I know there's some
Yeah.
organizations that are still doing that in the minor leagues. So for you guys to have a dietitian at every level and a nutrition coordinator, have yourself who has kind of multiple backgrounds where you can kind of help out as needed, like it sounds really really good. And it just helps the players, and ultimately like no matter what sport you work in, no matter what level you work at, like it's about the players, man. It really is. And if we can provide them
Mhm.
the best service that we can, like in my mind, I think we should do it. But I know I don't
Right.
make all the decisions everywhere. Obviously that's not that's above my pay grade and
Yeah.
above my head. But um No, so let's talk specifically now that you're with the strength and conditioning group up there. You've got your feet settled under you a little bit. You've kind of experienced what that looks like. How do you expect that to grow? Like, is this a position that you foresee yourself being in long term, or are you like itching to get back into the weight room someday, or is there some sort of middle ground where maybe you can be in the weight room and still do the dietitian route like further in the future? Like, what does this look like for you long term?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we have the support with our organization for our nutrition program, I see myself in this role. Again, very happy that I can just have those conversations with the strength coaches about, what we're seeing on the floor and what we're seeing in the game and how I can help from a nutrition standpoint. But yeah, I mean, that's really the route I see myself continuing to grow in, is just that nutrition side of things. I love what we're doing in terms of building the program. We're building a brand new kitchen, so that comes with hiring more chefs. How can we give our players the best food possible? And that in itself is a lot. I think that there's always, I want to be immersed in the players, and the player goals is what's important, but the food service side of things takes a lot of time as well. So really just how can I get better with that aspect? Because I've done the catering, I've worked with people, but going through this kitchen remodel, it's like learning equipment, learning how to build a kitchen for efficiency. Like that's all a chef experience, but I think I can grow in that area and learn just to bring that other side of me. Like what can I learn more about the cooking process that will help me in my knowledge as an RD to then relay to the players. So there's just a lot to grow there, and I think that's what excites me about this role is that I can continue to grow as a dietitian. And yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm not itching to get back, but as I mentioned before, I feel like I'm immersed in it already, and I'm on the floor, obviously not coaching guys, but seeing it happen and taking notes, and that's I'm quite happy there.
Yeah, the funny thing is, like, in the minor leagues, actually probably in the major leagues too, it feels like players are like typically happy if the clubhouse is clean, the laundry is done well, and the food is good.
Yeah,
And
food.
it feels like those three things, no matter what, always somehow like goes to the strength coach. So it's funny to me that like you've probably heard so much bitching over the years from guys about the food, and it's like, you know what?
Yeah,
I'm gonna fix this myself. Like I'm just gonna dive into nutrition and like take the
right.
bullets directly instead of
Yeah,
indirectly. I'm like, I don't know, man. That's a like they have all of their rage at one person. And the thing is, I don't know if this is your experience now as a on the nutrition side of things, but always felt like when I was the strength coach ordering food and the catering and all of that, it was like 10% of guys were never going to be happy. 10% of guys would always be happy, just thankful there's food there. And then everybody else, it depended on like how the game went that day. If they went four for
oh yeah,
four, the food was great. If they went 0 for 4, the food was terrible. And they were kind of that middle group. And it's like no matter what you had, you could have like steak dinner. People be like, steak dinner again? Really? Like, can't we
yeah,
have something different? Like, let's get pizza. And then like, all right, well, we'll have pizza one time. And then like, pizza's not really the healthiest option, man. We should have had steak dinner. And so I'm like, you know what?
yeah.
Like, you're right. You're absolutely right. Like, I don't know if the complaints come to you directly now and like you openly encourage that feedback, or if it's still like it goes to the strength coach and then the strength coach has to come to you and be like, hey, I heard this from the players.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely it's a tough job in terms of trying to please, however many people are in your traveling party. So, you're right. You get the steak that one night and somebody wanted it more rare, the other person wanted it more, well done. And you're just like, we can't have a travel with a personal chef for everybody, unfortunately. So you try to do your best to hit the masses, and then, without going too far. I think that the challenge is you want to bring variety in, but then you have individuals who look at that as like, well, I got to try everything. And you're trying to do the numbers according to you know, I know certain players, their preferences like the beef. I know certain players, their preferences the steak, or sorry, the chicken, salmon, vice, and so on and so forth. But I think you do like four different proteins, and everyone's like, "Ooh, I'll take a steak and a salmon and some shrimp," and then you're running out, and then somebody who's ever last in line is like, "Well, where'd all the food go?" You're like, "Well, so and so took some extra proteins, but like." So you're just not going to please everybody, and I feel like I take feedback pretty well. It's frustrating because some of the times like you just can't control it. Yes, I come up with a menu, so if it's like oh man, we have Chipotle again or whatever, like okay, that's on me. I hear you loud and clear. Yeah, I've gotten monotonous with that. That's on me. I'll change that. But if it's like man, this food is awful, it's like, well, I didn't cook it, and sorry I didn't like it wasn't cooked the way you like it. I still take that as feedback because obviously if a lot of people say the food was bad, then I just exclude that caterer for the next time. Um, but like I do feel like a little defeated at times where I'm like, man, I just wish everybody would walk out of here happy, but it's just not the case, especially when like we talked about earlier, you hold food for so long, it just dries out. Unfortunately, the way to keep it um, you know, the quality up as you cook it with butters and oils, things that some guys just don't like because then it's greasy, and we're trying to push that health model. But so there's just a balance. But I was fortunate. We had a good group. I didn't hear too many like impossible complaints, but hopefully as they get comfortable with me, they get more they can bring those to my attention because I did hear it a lot more from like the trainers or the strength coaches. They're like, hey man, so and so is talking about the food last night, and you should probably talk to him. So it's okay. I wish he would come to me for that, but I'm sorry he had to drag you in there. But it can be uncomfortable. Feedback can be uncomfortable, especially at home. Like you have chefs that you build a relationship with, and if something just isn't right, you just hate to go in there and say, "Listen, they didn't like this option. Let's keep this off the menu." Um, so I think that's it's important to hire people who can take that feedback and look at it as an opportunity to grow, versus just kind of shutting down and saying, "Well, nobody likes my food. I'm just gonna kind of." So
Yeah,
that's
I think
that's the
it's
challenge there.
it's it's easier in the big leagues, I think, because the resources and the budgeting are more elaborate. I can
Yeah.
remember in the minor leagues when the budgets kind of expanded universally in minor league baseball, and then it was like instead of only chicken, we have chicken or steak. And then
Yeah.
it was kind of like you said, like, oh, I get chicken and steak. And then so, well, you
Right.
were supposed to take one or the other, and then you run out of food. And it was like when you only had the chicken, you didn't run out of food. But when you
Right.
had more variety, you either ran out of food or everybody ate one but not the other. So then you were throwing food away. And then it was like, well, why are we spending more money on this? And then you
Right.
kind of find that balance as you go. You start to learn the group. And I think the good thing in the big leagues is like, not everybody, obviously, but there is a large group of guys that kind of become like the guys, like the core, so to speak, who are going to be
Right.
there for a while. And you get to know them and you get to know what they like, and then the guys on the outer edge that are kind of new from other organizations, you can learn them along the way, what their preferences are. And then
Right.
that kind of helps with like reducing waste, getting what most guys want, having a good variety. But it is tricky, man, and the other thing is like there's different cultures as well. So
Yeah.
you add the Latin food in, and then some guys really love Latin food and some don't.
Hmm.
You add in, we have like the Japanese players, like you add
Yeah.
in the sushi, and like some guys really love sushi and some guys don't. Like you try to add the variety, you try to add something different. For us, I know like when we go to certain cities, we'll get like the local food from, if we're in
Yeah.
Chicago, you get like deep dish pizza. If you're in Texas, you get barbecue, and sometimes guys like that and sometimes they don't. So I think the root of it is like it's hard to please everybody, but I think if there's a big core of guys that like you get it right most of the time, those other guys kind of are like on that periphery of like, just chirping a little bit, and then you can kind of address those. But like, I know for you guys, there are certain players that we don't have to say names, but I would assume everybody knows like kind of the core players that you have there. Like those
Yep.
guys are there for a while. Like if you can get them on the right path, like those are, I don't want to say more important, but if you have those locked in, it takes the other complaints and you can kind of address those. Like you don't want to have complaints from the same core guys over and over and over, because those are the guys that are
Right.
there long term. Like at least that's how I've kind of seen it. And I think it kind of worked that way. And then the the complaints kind of come and go with performance, with guys getting
Yeah.
traded, with guys getting released or going to new orgs, or but that core group, like if they're happy, like usually most people are genuinely happy. At least in my experience.
Yeah.
I don't have specifically experience as a nutritionist, so I don't want
Yeah.
to.
No,
You could tell me I'm way wrong and be like, no, dude, they
no, you're,
always complain.
yeah, no, you're right. I mean, you're right though. I mean, we do have like a player council that we are to work with regarding the food, like that. It's part of like like it's mandated that we have a group of, I think it's like 3 to 4, but
Mhm.
you establish those on those things, like who's been there, who has a voice in the locker room. Like you can see who has the voice, and not just like the voice who talks the loudest, but like who can like rationalize and help be on your side. Because if you can get that corrected, you can have great conversation with some of those leaders and just say like, hey, listen, you know this is why we chose this menu. um and you can give them kind of the background and the rationale. And what do you think? Like, what are your thoughts? Oh, players would love if we went to Chicago and you got some deep dish pizza. Like, guys would love that. Okay, it's like you use them to help, and then guys love it, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we're working on this together. And um yeah, if you can please those guys, those main players, again, it's not that they're more important, but they might be a little bit more pickier or whatnot. But yeah, I think if you can just get the masses kind of on your side, then when there is a complaint, you can kind of, all right, well, go talk to our players and see if they feel the same way. And then oftentimes that kind of nips it in the butt. But um yeah, no, you're exactly right. And yeah, an 0 for 4 night changes a lot of things. The steak tastes great when you hit a home run.
Yes, 100%. And I think that's probably what I was trying to get at, was like some sort of leadership group or core group that like
Yeah,
becomes the voice for the rest of the clubhouse that you can kind of work through. And it's good that you guys have that. I know we do too. And when there's new hires, to the point that they may even bring some of those guys in and have them like test out the cooking, or
yeah,
just check in with them and kind of see how we can make things better. And everybody that I've, in my limited experience of talking with people in the nutrition field, like the biggest thing that they all say is like, you have to be willing to take feedback and you can't take things personally. And as far as I know, everybody that I've been around like encourages players, like to the point that they'll have suggestion boxes, or
yeah,
like send out surveys or what, like, hey, how
yeah,
can we help you? Can we post the menu ahead of time? Can we clean up the food with this? Do you want less oil? Do you want more vegetable? Do you want less red meat, more chicken, more fish? Like, what do you guys want? And they're always open to that feedback, and none of them really have like an ego or like get upset if you're, I think the biggest thing is they don't get upset if you come to them with some sort of like constructive, like, it's not we don't want this, it's instead of this we would prefer this, and you're like, oh, okay, I can
right.
make adjustments there. But if you only say like, I don't want this, and you're like, well, what do you want? And you're like, I don't know, but not that. It's like, well, it's not really
Yeah,
constructive in any way. I can't work with that.
right. Yeah, it's interesting because you do have some individuals who they'll be the first one to tell you that you did it wrong. But then when you go to seek them for like the next road trips menu, or like, hey, well, what would you like to see more? Like, it's like they don't want that responsibility. So it's like, if you can provide that, like you said, that was a great way of saying it. Like, if you can provide why you want something, great, tell me and we'll get it done. But if it's just like, I didn't like that, but I don't know what else we can do, it's like, well, now we're in a lot of trouble, you know. So um, yeah, I think that's important for sure. I think another thing too that's really helpful, and not a lot of visiting clubs have it, but we're hoping to get it more at home, is like made to order stations, or where they can cook in the clubhouse. There's a huge sigh of relief when I walk into a place and like you just know you can get made to order cooking. Um, you know, like in Boston, we will have some like made to order pasta stations, and guys just love it because it's just fresh. They can pick their ingredients. Like the guys that are picky about tomatoes, you know, they can build it their own. And guys just love being able to build their own for some reason. So anytime we go on the road and we can get somebody in the clubhouse that can cook, even if it's a small little skillet, like we'll do that a lot just because it tends to go over really well.
New York, man, special
I
place.
know. Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys have just out of my own curiosity, is there a society or a group for the nutritionists in the same way that we have the PBS CCS?
No, no. So we're under that branch. So like we pay dues to that.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean we do have our core group of MLB dietitians on, you know, group chats and emails and whatnot, which is helpful. So but yeah, we don't have like a dedicated society.
Yeah, I got you. That was just for my
Yeah,
own
yeah,
curiosity.
we have like a CPSDA, which is for professional sports dietitians, like all across the board. It's an optional membership, so you don't have to be a part of it, but it's a great way to connect to other with other dietitians across like NFL, NBA, hockey, Olympics, and everything. So that's kind of like our, you know, organization, but again, it's not specified towards baseball.
Yeah, that was kind of my curiosity was like how much are you able to connect with other dietitians either within baseball or out of it, but I didn't know if you guys had your own society or not.
Yeah,
So, Scott, I appreciate your time, man, and I'm genuinely happy to see that you're happy in the new role. Before we shut this one down, is there anything else that we missed that you want to hit on? Any final advice? Anything that we need to cover? I mean, I think we covered a lot, to be honest.
yeah, yeah. That was great. I mean, I think the only thing I would just like to say is not to get like too far down like my journey, but you know, I think it's important as young strength coaches, trainers, like whoever are trying to figure out like where they want to be. Like I can't stress enough trying to go down a route that you're happy and passionate about. I think that was one thing early on I may have changed about myself was I was almost looking for what the organization or what other people wanted, like maybe what was the trend, and I tried to maybe immerse myself a little bit too much when that wasn't really my role. Um, you know, and that's like I said, that's kind of what really what led me down to the nutrition path was, um, you know, being able to focus on something that I was already doing that I was passionate about. Um, you know, again, maybe a little off topic there, but just for anyone that may be listening to this, you know, I think that will, in the long run, you'll end up being a lot happier and providing a lot more value versus just kind of chasing what maybe other people want. So, um, you know, that was maybe something I left out earlier in my intros, but just feel like that's important. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, I love that because my youngest brother is in exercise science now in his undergrad, and he's like, "Oh, I want to be a strength coach in baseball." And I'm like, "Well, do you want to do that because I do that and you've seen me do that, or like, do you just want to be around the game? Do you just want to be a strength coach?" I like because you can be a strength coach in a number of areas. You
Right.
can influence the game of baseball in a number of ways. You could be a coach with an S&C background who does CSCS. You could, be a CSCS who does nutrition. Like, just find what's going to make you happy and what like drives you to keep going to work because it is a long,
Yeah.
stressful season. It is a long, stressful day,
Right.
and like if you're really not passionate about it, you are going to feel the weight of that significantly. And that's why I say, like, I'm genuinely happy for you that you're in a good
Uh,
spot, that you pursued what you wanted to. And now it seems like you're in this place that you can kind of take it to this next level. And, who knows, maybe you become the example for like future dietitians and strength and conditioning coaches and combining the two. And
Yeah.
That's exciting for people in the performance world, I think, is just being able to blend multiple things and be happy. I think that's the biggest thing is being happy and having a good
Yeah.
family life.
Yeah, exactly. It's 100% very important to make sure you're happy with what you're doing and you're making an impact, and that you're also valued back. So, you know, reaching out to people and networking has been great, especially with nowadays with social media, LinkedIn, all that. Like, find people who have jobs that you're interested in, and just talk. You don't need to make it a big thing, but just, hey, how did you get to where you're at, and what advice do you have? And it just goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate your friendship over the years. I appreciate all the interviews we've done for the PBS CCS,
Yeah,
and it's been equally fun to be able to talk about non-baseball strength and conditioning as well with
yeah,
you. I'm glad everything's going well. Enjoy the holidays, and we'll see you this season, man.
sounds good. You as well. Thanks for having me. It's always good to catch up with you. I appreciate it.